This is the Seahawkers podcast. I'm Brandon Schultz, and I am joined by the protector, Mr. Phil Leidick. Adam probably going to join us here soon as we have some big news happening this Wednesday, January the 10th, as we just watched Pete Carroll wrap up his press conference with the media. And oh man, that was a little bit tough to sit through because there were some moments within that I think we all got a little bit emotional by, and it is a little bit. Here's how I know it's a little bit of a shocker for some folks, Phil, is because I've had multiple people who aren't so much connected to the Seahawks text me and say, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea that Pete Carroll would be on his way out."
Yeah, I guess this was happening while you were in your interview for the replacement there, Brandon. I told people kept wondering when you were going to do the live reaction. And I said, well, Brandon's in a meeting. And someone in the Discord said, yeah, I think Brandon's interviewing for the spot. So we got to wait for him to get out of his interview with Jody. So I'm interested to hear how that interview went. But all joking aside, it was tough to keep back the tears. It's been a long time since I've felt that I don't know if that's ever happened in a press conference for me and then looking at the pictures, some of the great moments, I was feeling a little squeeze there in the tear ducts. Hey, yeah.
Adam joined us a little bit late. It took him a little while to, I think, to recover.
I thought we were just waiting until the end of the presser, so my bad. That's why
we were. You maybe jumped in a little bit late. That's fine.
Oh, okay. Well, super under the weather today. So I apologize for coughs and sneezes and all that stuff to begin with. Sad day for Seattle, sports history here. The winningest era of Seahawks football now comes to an end. And obviously there's going to be lots of time to get excited about the next person and what can come out of that. But in the moment, I'm pretty bummed out, man. And like you guys said with the presser, definitely was feeling a little emotional about that too. So, yeah, man, the Rumsfelds got their way. Congratulations on your hissy fit. You got what you wanted. And, I would have taken one more year and let him go out, the way that I think that he has earned, and the organization felt differently. So here we go. And whoever the next guy is, short of, angry Jim Harbaugh, I will be completely excited about.
Yeah, we've got a lot to talk about in terms of potential replacements, thoughts around what may have happened in the meantime as to why this change came when it did, because we heard from Pete Carroll. I think he dropped a few different hints as to what may have happened, but let's start off with the note that because the word, I think, came out through Schefter first that Pete Carroll was going to be let go and that was likely going to stay on it as an advisor. And so at that point, I think we knew that was the information then leaked from either John Schneider or Jody Allen, one of the two. We wouldn't be quite sure. But then we saw the message come out from the official Seahawks.com Twitter account, saying from a statement from Jody Allen: after thoughtful meetings and careful consideration for the best interest of the franchise, we have amicably agreed with Pete Carroll that his role will evolve from head coach to remain with the organization as an advisor. Pete is the winningest coach in Seahawks history, brought the city its first Super Bowl title, and created a tremendous impact over the past 14 years on the field and in the community. His expertise in leadership and building a championship culture will continue as an integral part of our organization moving forward. Pete will always be a beloved member of the Seahawks family. And I think the key part of this, though, at the beginning of him staying on as an advisor. And we heard from Pete, one of the questions he was asked early on, what does that mean? They haven't actually figured it out yet, but we do know that it's at least amicable enough that he's not saying, screw you guys, I'm out of here.
Unmute your mic if you're going to talk about things. So, yeah, no doubt about that, man. It did seem like they were able to kind of keep it professional and it's everything that has a beginning has an end, and ends aren't always neat and tidy. And that's okay, I suppose. And yeah, I think even the people that hated Pete more than anything, there's going to be a point where you're going to look up one day and be like, man, I miss the old man. I do. And there's a lot about the Pete Carroll era that I think was unique and amazing and something to be celebrated. One thing that frustrates me is some of the people that were ready for the change maybe before some of the rest of us is the lip service given to thank you. Oh, thank you, Pete. No, on to give this at least a fucking day, people. And give him his props. Like that's something that deeply bothers me. But there is a lot of exciting ideas going forward, and it'll be interesting to see what happens to the roster as well going forward, because I think that puts a lot of the rest of this up in the air as well, even with John Schneider still as the GM.
And before we go forward, I also agree with Adam. As a lifetime fan, all I've ever known as being a Seahawk fan. As I was introduced to football, it was being a Seahawk fan. And what we got used to for a lot of decades was not much winning. And then Holmgren came along, got us to a Super Bowl, super stoked about that. Then we got stuck with some down Mora time, and then Pete comes in, and I wasn't sure. My dad and I are, who is this guy? And we know he was at USC, but weren't sure if this vibe was going to work. But he kind of grew on you, especially by the time you got to the Beastquake and everything. And then to actually bring us success and a full-on trophy, and his style and vibe and everything that he brought, it's just been a joy. It's been a true joy to watch him lead my favorite team to the great success. And aside from the SB49, the situation there, we were all sad that took place. I want to say that I was finally, and I was with what Brandon's been saying, I finally was getting a little bit possibly ready because of the 2 Rams games this year. And I mentioned that in the Discord. That's been the hardest thing of the year, were those 2 things, to where I was ready. But I was with Adam in, we need another year. Let's give him another year, bring in somebody great at DC, let him do that. And if it doesn't work, the rebuild didn't work, that's okay. But before this last couple days, I was not ready at all. I'm still not ready. And I want to just kind of appreciate the awesomeness that has been the Pete Carroll era. Good to see you, Clinton.
Hello, Mr. Phil. How we doing, boys? How we doing?
Doing well. We can hear you just fine. Adam, not so much. He's a little under the weather.
I'm sorry,
that's not even the reason that I feel mid. I'm legitimate sad that one of my favorite sports figures of all time has been fired by my favorite organization. It bums me out.
Yeah. I kind of hopped on when I caught the tail end of what you were saying and was able to end a meeting on time and then hop over to this, which is a more fun and engaging thing to go chat with as it's like 4:45 or something like that Eastern now on my time. I realized certainly time to reflect on what Pete was and is, and he's a legend, right? That's it. He's a legend, and he's beyond a Seahawks legend. He's an NFL wide and a football wide legend. The dude's going to be Hall of Fame bound, and he's meant a lot to just the game. And I know I don't live in that area in the PNW, but I've been a fan a long time. He changed a lot. And he's legit. He's a legit coach, right? He's a great coach and a great motivator. And I've even taken things that I've adopted from him style wise and brought into my professional world, and it's worked. So that kind of shows you his reach, right? And with all that, turning it over, like, look, the thing I'm excited about is I am excited that it comes with a clean slate, that it's like, hey, the other DCs and the OCs, you're going to get your walking papers too, and the new coach is going to get a chance to figure this all out. And I know we got a lot of time to talk about that, but that part to me is actually, that becomes the exciting part that we will, roll over to and begin to get excited about as Seahawks fans, because there's a lot of risk there. We don't know what the answers are. And I realize today's about celebrating the guy that just left us. And he's a damn good coach, man.
Yeah. And I do want to celebrate Pete Carroll and recognize, you look at his record. he was the third winningest active head coach behind Bill Belichick and Andy Reid. And I mean, we know that Bill Belichick could be on the way out in New England. There's even been rumors of, could Andy Reid be toward his time? Could his time be ending as head coach?
Oh my gosh. My dad being the Chiefs fan, Brandon,
yeah.
We were talking about this the other day, and he's like, yeah, there's a bunch of people that are sitting here going, Mahomes and Reid can't figure it out anymore, and we need to get rid of them. And it just reminded me so much of some of the knee-jerk people in this fan base too. It's unbelievable.
Well, and I don't know what's necessarily behind the Andy Reid thing. And, he's been around the game for a long time.
They didn't win a chip every single year. That's what.
Yeah, I didn't get that impression, so that's why I'm kind of grasping. I've just heard rumors of that. This is the potential is there. So Pete Carroll, third winningest active head coach, and he finishes just behind Tom Coughlin on the all-time list, number 13. He's tied with Mike Tomlin actually as the most winningest coach of all time in the NFL.
Guys, I went into UPS the morning after SB 49. I used to work there early in the morning, so we're talking 3 a.m, and a whole bunch of people are like, "We got to fire Pete now." I mean, he didn't give the ball to Marshawn that many years ago, and I think some of them have been waiting for this moment this entire time. And I just that's the difficult part to imagine is we've had a lot of great enjoyable football. I like the way Pete has treated people. He deserves a ton of respect.
Yeah, the reason I put that coronavirus tweet up there, or comment, or whatever the fuck these things are, you're an asshole, dude. Knock it off. Screw you.
I would just choose not to acknowledge it, and that's fine.
No. I mean, people like that need to know that they're just fucking assholes. So there you go, buddy.
All right.
Maybe it's the Dayquil talking. I don't know.
Maybe it is. So the thing that I'm curious about though is, maybe what changed in the last couple days, because, was this, what was different about Pete's vision of this going forward and then what was the vision of Jody and John Schneider? Because that's one of the interesting points that came out of this, right? Is that John Schneider continues on as GM. And there were quite a few comments throughout the press conference of Pete Carroll saying, "Hey, this is turning over to John now. This is your deal." And he almost sounded like a proud dad, and that here's your opportunity now. But it makes me wonder what was going into that. Like, was there an opportunity for John Schneider to move on that then made part of this move a necessity, or what was the reason then for him to turn it over? Or was it just that he wanted to keep his coordinators around? There was kind of the decision between John Schneider and Jody that there at least had to be some change. Pete wasn't willing to do that. And so, these are all details that were questioned throughout the press conference. Pete Carroll obviously not wanting to go into detail.
I think the piece for me there is like, Pete's made changes at the DC and OC level, quite a bit. I mean, he's been here a long time. So I just don't think that would have been the thing he would have, died on that hill type thing. Like, nope, I got to keep Clint Hurt. Like, Clint Hurt's, hey, is what it is. We didn't execute. And the numbers show a bad regression on defense this last couple of years. And it's just, for me, Pete wanted to play a certain brand of football. And unfortunately, we've gotten further away from that brand of football. And there's a lot of core talent that's still on this team. And we talked about it even just yesterday. Like, hey, we go into this next year. Now it's going to be a whole new regime, but we're in a sweet advantage that we have a very, very good quarterback on an extremely team friendly deal. That is, most of the NFL does not enjoy that. Most of the NFL either does not have a competent quarterback. We saw a lot of that this year, or they're paying $45 million plus, to $50 million for a good quarterback or a great quarterback, and it really hamstrings what they can do. So the good news is, I think anybody looking at the spectrum of opportunities, like the top tier coaches, are like, great sports city, amazing history, and a pretty darn okay roster. It's just, I think, again, getting back to it, Pete kind of floated away from what he intended to be. I don't think it's Pete's fault, but I think it's the reality. And I think when they looked at it, the youth and other things he's talking about on Brock and Salk, it's just probably like, look, maybe that's not it. And they want the change they want. So I think that's more it, Brandon, than him wanting to hold on to a certain coordinator at this point. That's my guess.
Yeah, when the news first came out, especially with it being him moving to an advisor role, my immediate thought was, okay, he's moving to this advisor role, and he could be advising Jody not to hire Jim Harbaugh, because that makes a lot of sense.
Please God, no. Please God, no.
And I don't think John Schneider would be into that either necessarily, but the thing that kind of made the most sense, obviously, with Dan Quinn being one of those names that's thrown around, and looking at even some of as soon as this happened, my email inbox, I have 2 emails with all of the odds-on head coaching favorites, and Dan Quinn toward the top of the list. And so I was thinking, okay, well, would Pete want to step aside? Does he have that kind of relationship with Dan Quinn that he sees like an opportunity for John Schneider and Dan Quinn then to keep this going forward? That kind of made some sense. But then throughout the commentary, I wasn't quite sure. So I'll give you guys a minute to marinate on that. I want to get to a couple super chats that came in. We've got executive producer of our live shows, Ryan 911, coming in with a $9.99 super chat. At least we can count on these guys not going anywhere, right, guys? Right, guys?
In it to win it, boys. Yeah.
Thank you, Ryan. You're awesome as always, dude. Thank you.
Barry, aka Van T, with a $9.99 super chat. For those who didn't catch it, Pete is the natural. Yeah, talking about how the way that he wants to walk it off, right?
Yeah.
And Pete Baglio with a $5 super chat. Harbaugh going to come here to escape sanctions like Pete had to. Love Pete, by the way. I hope you're saying, Paul, come here as into the NFL to escape sanctions, not come to Seattle.
I thought he meant come to the podcast. Just bring Jim, live. Adam, you know that.
I don't want him as my head football coach, but if he wants to join the Seahawks Podcast Network, he is more than welcome. That would be fun.
I've heard him on Jim Rome back in the day. He does not come strong enough with his takes to be a member of this podcast team. I'm sorry. He's not hired.
Probably not. It's interesting. There's a lot of time to talk about all this and everything about who replaces him and what direction they go. And it sounds like John's going to basically be the architect of that vision. I went back. So looking at the head coaches that were hired or started coaching in 21, because I think the last 2 years, we don't know if those coaches have been good or bad yet. And you go back 5 years from there to 2017, there's been 43 head coaches hired in that time. 10 of them have been a success. You have a 30% chance to get this right.
Yeah.
And that's pretty low odds, man. And, we hired Jim Mora the year after Holmgren and managed to get rid of him quick, fast, and in a hurry, which was good. And then stumble into Pete Carroll. That doesn't happen very often. So there's this fan base that was really upset about the lack of winning. It could be real bad for 4, 5, 6, 7 years here. Like that's what the history shows. Hopefully, with the fact that Pete Carroll has built this into a place that I think makes it attractive for top candidates, that we can go out and get one of the guys that I think could succeed here. But it's less likely than more likely.
You know what Dave Grosby always said when Piniella was fired from the Mariners, and he always said it when people were upset with Pete, he goes, fans, just be careful that you don't get tired of winning. And that's been my concern all along. But I do have a little confidence in John. I'm hoping, John's never hired a coach before, but he seems to be a good evaluator, has a sharp mind. But the biggest concern I've had is the same thing you said, Adam. How often coaches come in and they're right back out the door.
The thing that I really like, though, with John Schneider making this decision is that he has worked with a lot of sharp coaches going back, during his time in Kansas City when he worked for the elder Schottenheimer, and he had Mike McCarthy on that Kansas City Chiefs staff, and Mike Solari, who ended up coming back to Seattle. So he's had through his time in Kansas City, through all those years in Green Bay, and now through time here in Seattle, where he's worked with Pete, obviously, like he knows what winning cultures look like and coaches who can help manage some of those winning cultures. And so I think even having that as a general manager and having that foundation, it comes across. It's an important thing to have when making a hiring decision.
I feel like, Brandon, you just put the hat in the ring for John for bring back Dave Canales. HC. That's what I'm, maybe the tea leaves I'm reading here is like, yeah, he's been here. And hey, that's I want to appreciate Pete and the other side of me. It's kind of similar to like we talked about when the clock ran out on the Bears Green Bay game. My mind immediately went to, okay, our next meaningful game is next year. And I was removed from the last 3 or 4 minutes of that game. And I just being honest. And I certainly will definitely, I will always love Pete, man. He brought us a chip and I love his everything. I love his kind of presence, his fabric. And I can't help but to be excited for what could be. And I really do go back to, I think we've got a pretty strong, especially offensively, right? Defense, look, it struggled a bit. There's some studs, but it was a struggle bus. It just is what it is. It was a struggle. I don't think it's talent deficiency, and that'll be interesting. But offensively, it's got to be one of the most attractive jobs in the market. That is a cool offense to walk into. That means something. So, and again, Adam, to your point, and Brandon, what you were saying too, what has been set up, I do think we'll be able to attract one of the top people who are like, ooh, this is going to be interesting and get interesting pretty darn quickly. That's my thought. Cause I think it's a really nice scenario to walk into if you're a whatever OC that's ready or a DC that's ready or a head coach that might've just got fired. That's like, ooh, that's a pretty good slate of talent they got there in the PNW.
Yeah, I think you hit on a lot of good stuff there, Clinton, and it kind of ties into this a little bit here. So for Keyboard Eddie here, it's not your decision either, and you're not smarter than any other person on this planet, so enjoy that. I think the biggest thing that is going to be interesting is to see which direction that this goes. Do they go with somebody like a Mike Vrabel, that's a retread, who is a defensive-minded guy, who has a winning culture that he had brought to Tennessee and one of the few Belichick disciples to actually succeed? Or do they go and switch to the more offensive minded, fantasy football, Star Wars type football? And, I see some people saying that they'd be really excited about Ben Johnson. Okay, that might be cool. He better bring a damn good DC with him then, because to your point, Clinton, there's a lot of good players on offense. This roster isn't devoid of talent, which is one of the reasons I wanted to give Pete one more year to figure it out. But I think they're more talented on offense than they are on defense. And so to me, it makes more sense to bring in a guy that has more defensive chops, or maybe has ties to a guy that has some serious defensive chops.
Man, I think I just want to step aside and let Adam fight all the commenters as he
Dude, I'm not in the mood today.
I can tell that you're not in the mood, and this is entertaining to me because
Good.
I'm kind of here for it. I want to see how this plays out.
I'm sick of them, dude. I'm sick of them. I've been sick of them for the last 3 weeks. I've been sick of them all season.
The Jim Harbaugh thing is also weird to me because especially after watching the national championship this week, like I can think of, for one, there's the rivalry that goes back between Pete Carroll and Jim Harbaugh. There's the fracture between Richard Sherman, Doug Baldwin, and the dude, and then to add then this national championship business, like it'd be hard as Huskies fans, like wanting that too. And got the Snail in chat with the $2 super chat. Lane Kiffin for head coach for the Carroll haters. Lane Kiffin, not it for me either, Snail. No. We do have, though, some next head coach odds. And the first one that came through, I felt was the most accurate to kind of how things played out immediately. Dan Quinn, kind of the odds-on favorite. Mike Vrabel being the next one after that. And I know as soon as that news came out, there were a lot of us saying, oh, hey, maybe Mike Vrabel will want to come back and be a defensive coordinator. Based on how things are sounding around the league, there's enough fan bases that want Mike Vrabel as their head coach that I think he would be a guy that would be a clear choice maybe for head coach versus a coordinator. But other names, it was interesting that a lot of these names on this first list that I received our defensive specialists, Dan Quinn, Mike Vrabel, Brian Flores, Mike McDonald, Ravens defensive coordinator, Brian Flores, the Vikings defensive coordinator, Steve Wilkes, the 49ers defensive coordinator. And then we've got, let's see, Raheem Morris and Lincoln. Oh, it took all the way to Lincoln Riley, USC head coach. And as a former Oklahoma Sooner, no thank you to that one either. But then Jim Harbaugh last on that particular list.
Good. Let's keep him down there, right? Just quickly, Jim Harbaugh is clearly he's a successful coach. Can't take it away from him. I don't want him here. Don't want him here. He looking back at
run the ball.
Oh, he can learn. Oh, yeah, he can. The piece of him not standing up for Baldwin and Sherman coming out of college, like, to me, it's not because they became legends and all that jazz. It's just like, those are your dudes. Like it's the kind of the way you treat people type thing. And they were one's a Hall of Famer and one's a Seahawks legend that will be in our Ring of Honor. Clearly, both really strong enough and good enough to be in the NFL. And he, he's kind of underplayed them, and they were his guys. No, thank you. That one, don't love it.
You guys mind?
Yeah.
Schneider, we were talking about all the talent that we have here. He really has two big targets to hit. I mean, Schneider we were preparing to do a big show like into season, what we thought of the year, and then this Pete thing happened, so we switched it out. I'm thinking Schneider's got to fix his trench issue. I mean, there's a lot of talent, but both sides of the trenches, no matter who he brings in, if he doesn't get that solved, it's not as easy as just a hand in glove. Whoever comes here is likely to succeed, because you can't really win the NFL football if you're the worst team on the trenches on both sides every single play. I mean, Gino had to do a lot of hero ball throughout. So whoever he brings in, he's got two huge goals, Schneider. You got to get the right guy to lead the team. And then your other job happens to be, which you haven't done lately, is fix our trench problem. And so that's just been running through my mind a little bit, Adam.
Yeah, I want to just quickly say too, the Colin Cowherd said very recently that if the Seahawks had Josh Allen, that we'd be the best team in the league. So I can't. What's he watching? He actually got. I know it's clickbaity and all that jazz. He's like, oh, if they had Josh Allen, that's it. They'd be the best team. Like, dude, we cannot stop the run, and we cannot run without hero ball Ken Walker doing hero things. So you're absolutely right. And Adam, he did toss it to you. So take it away if you want, man.
And he's on mute again.
All right. Now I'm going to stop being an idiot. Probably not, but I'm going to give it a go. Basically, you guys really just hinted at a fundamental truth of football that will never change as long as the game is played in pads and they hit. And that is that it is won and lost in the trenches. And, I know a lot of people get really excited about the perimeter oriented stuff and all of that sort of thing, but that's really where the failure in this organization has been. And that's why, as sick as I am today, I think I have a case of the Vrabes, because I would be excited for Vrabel. That's a guy who has the type of chops to have a team play very tough in the trenches. And from my estimation at his time in Tennessee, he was thrown under the bus by a GM that he could not get along with in any way. Just look at his expression when they traded AJ Brown, right, in that press conference. I don't think he was done any favors there. And Geno Smith would easily be the best quarterback that he's ever had as a head coach.
There you go. See, was Cowherd talking about Josh Allen, the defensive lineman, the pass rusher, Clinton?
Could have been maybe taken wildly out of context. And knowing Colin Cowherd, he doesn't even know who that defensive lineman is. He's, he's pretty surface level from the shock jock sports guys, as I see it anyway.
I do want to go back to that idea of this being an appealing place to come, particularly with and even on the defensive side, you have pieces, right? And on the offense, though, it's set up in a way. We were doing 3 and 3 out just yesterday, Clinton, and the comment came in the chat about how Geno Smith, because he missed on all of his escalators in his contract, essentially, he had 5 different that were worth $2 million that would have taken his 2024 contract from a $12.5 million contract to a $22.5 million contract in terms of cash value. That's not counting the dead cap money and that sort of thing. But so now you're talking about going into the final 2 years of Geno Smith's contract, and it's either a decision, do we keep Geno at $12.5 million for next year, or do we cut him and accept an $18 million cap hit? Like any organization, that's going to be a no-brainer type move, because yeah, Geno Smith is a $12 million quarterback. Although I guess you could argue if you're really going to tear this thing down to the studs, then that makes him a very attractive trade candidate.
Oh, without question. I mean, it is silly to move on from Geno at this point, you would think, just because he has played at such a high level. Go back and look at QB rating, and I'm not talking about QBR. That's a stupid stat. I'm talking about traditional QB rating. And the guys around him in that echelon of players, the guys around him are Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, some of the heavy hitters that you think about. I don't think he's one of those heavy hitters. I think he's pretty close to it, and a guy that you can win a lot of football games with. And monetarily wise too, it does make sense, like you were saying, Brandon. I do think it's going to be crazy to see what John Schneider does here. Do they really just blow it up? Because many of the regime changers, the Rumsfelds, that's what they wanted. They didn't only want Pete Carroll gone. They wanted, as according
starting
to Blumey,
over,
every atom of this team to be reworked. I think the one thing that maybe doesn't make this an attractive place for guys to come to is you hear coaches and head coaching candidates talk a lot about being able to work for the right owner. And I'm not trying to say Jody Allen's a bad owner or anything like that. But the problem is that they are going to move on at some point because of the fact that they're supposed to sell the team. And again, I don't know how long that is because there's so many varying reports, but that sort of uncertainty at the top, I wonder if that makes it a little more difficult to get somebody in.
Did you guys notice what people were complaining about with Geno last year? Well, he started out pretty good and then he regressed. So he's a regressing quarterback. We're going to get second half Geno this year. Now, what do we got? Have you guys noticed this year? He started out good. Then he had the little slump, but he ended as one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the league by almost any measure. Pocket awareness, no interceptions. I mean, game-winning drives. He was doing everything at the end. I'm not hearing a lot about, well, he ended so great, so next year we're going to get into the season Geno. I mean, I've looked around the boards. I just haven't seen that. Maybe I'm missing something, gentlemen.
Is there a lack of consistency, Phil?
How dare we call that out, right? And the piece, Phil, too, on 3 and 3 out yesterday, Adam, I was saying, it's been interesting to hear you talk about this as a 3-year rebuild, and obviously now that's changed, right? In an instant, that's changed. And the point I brought up to Brandon just yesterday, I was like, the 3-year arc I'm actually most interested in is the Geno 3-year arc, because in many ways he improved this year, and Geno will go on and he said that himself too. And we said just yesterday, okay, what was missing this year were the 35, 40-yard bombs we saw, and we happened to finish the year with one, which is kind of, I don't know if that's ironic or coincidence, but it's one of those two things. But it makes for a really cool story. It's like, that's how we won a lot last year, was the deep ball. Then that was taken away, and it mainly because he had less time, because it was a less consistent offensive line, and he still progressed. So it's like, man, that year 3 of Geno as a full starter, I still think is such an attractive piece for any of these dudes coming in. It's going to be, again, I'm pretty darn bullish. We're going to get a very good head coach in here. This is a good scenario, man.
One measure that I always use when we look at different guys coming and going around the league and things like that, how does your biggest rival feel about it? I've been seeing a lot of this bullshit. A lot of really excited Niners fans. Maybe I ought to tell you something. They're sick of seeing Pete Carroll too. We dominated him for the entire Pete Carroll era,
up till the last 2 years. Yeah.
On a whole, even if you include the last couple years. So
Pete and Russ together were Niner crushers, as much as we want to say about Russ. Together, they crushed the Niners.
And he got the best out of Russell Wilson. I mean, Pete's such a good coach on so many levels in ways that maybe we never appreciated, and we won't until we start watching a new era of football come about here. It's like I said, to me, it's a sad day, and I will be excited tomorrow when we sit down and really start going through this stuff and everything. But today I'm not.
Yeah, I can understand that. I think that And it's a good reminder that everybody might be in a different place. Like I'm sure there's people that are outside, running around in their underwear, like waving a towel above their head because this is the moment they've been waiting for.
And I know there's a couple of podcasters out there that are dancing on Pete Carroll's.
There might even be members of our flock,
right
Adam.
Yeah, maybe that too. I just hope that the proper respect is paid along the way here. And I don't think that's too much to ask.
No. And I mean, gosh, Pete has done a lot. He's such a great leader that we've seen over and over again, those moments of leadership. And it's those things that I know I'm going to miss a lot about Pete. And so I didn't get a sense for sure. Their talk of the talk is there, and it mentions him being an advisor.
Maybe. Who's
to say though, if another team comes along and says, we want Pete Carroll as our head coach, that he doesn't think about it for a second and it is like, okay, I'm ready to keep doing this. I don't know. I didn't get a sense from Pete that he is particularly done with head coaching completely.
I don't know too many people that are bringing in a head coach that old. And people talk about this even with Belichick. And at the end of the day, I do think that there's a possibility he could stay out as a consultant and that sort of thing. It all depends on who they bring in as head coach. There's some coaches that aren't going to want that. And then there's some coaches that'll be totally fine with it. So he didn't even seem to know what the best move here was in terms of him being on as an advisor, or if he even was going to be.
Oh, well, it kind of takes me back to the idea of, when Pete's here, the idea of having Mike Holmgren as an advisor to Pete. And you could tell, that wouldn't necessarily work with Pete. And so it will completely be coach dependent.
He's going to the Hall of Fame, though, right? I mean, that's settled.
Yeah.
You guys
Yeah. I mean, we got to get Holmgren there first, though. Gosh, the dude's been waiting forever.
Well, as the only dude that lives on the East Coast, I'll tell you this about that question. There's a lot of folks who don't see it that way. They think Pete was kind of got lucky, right? And the USC thing left that in disarray, that then went back to the NFL. And they view Pete as kind of getting lucky to get Russ and then get the LOB around him and only win one. There's a lot of that out there. So just be prepared.
20 years of just dumbass luck, man, year after year. Just, he must have 17 or no, he's got 20 horseshoes then shoved up his ass, one for each and every year. He just got lucky as a head coach.
Yeah, we also have to remember.
I know that's not you, Clinton. But
I know.
This is crazy. What did Russ do without Pete? I mean, what about his SC times? The way he completely transformed that team. He came here from Jim Mora, picked up Marshawn, helped draft the LOB, went to 2 Super Bowls. They would have won more if it wasn't for one mistake. Is one mistake going to keep him out of the Hall of Fame? He has a landslide case. I'm fascinated that Clinton has heard this through the grapevine that this West Coast guy can't do it. I'm fascinated.
It's just what a lot of the folks that I've been around remember too. I live in New England. He has a New England history here, and there's he didn't cut it here.
Jets.
So there's a lot of that in this region, right? So that's tainting the water. Let's put it that way. Hey, look, my stance is very, very clear. He's going to be in the Hall of Fame, and I think they'll do it in time, since he is already, he's going to live hopefully a long time. But there's an end to everybody's life, and he's already 72 years old. So I think they're going to be like, when he's available, okay, let's get this one in, so he could celebrate it while he's still youthful, as hopefully he remains for quite a long time.
Yeah, he's going to be around for 15 years. So
at least.
That's good. And the idea about the Hall of Fame is funny to me, because I feel like people use this argument with Holmgren too. Like, well, he went to one championship in Green Bay, and he took the Seahawks, but he lost. And
it's pretty easy to do. I mean, it happens about every other year. So
the other point that I want to make is that the Hall of Fame is not just looking at your head coaching record as a coach.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Holmgren was a winning championship member of those.
They both were
Niners.
With the Niners.
Team. Yeah,
they
and
both
so
were
is
with
Pete
the
Carroll. So
yeah.
They have long time tenures that date back in the NFL prior to their head coaching time, where they're also involved in championship teams. So just because they only have one Super Bowl doesn't mean they have, well, gosh, Who's the guy that got inducted before the Steelers head coach? Doesn't he only have one Super Bowl and he got in before Mike Holmgren? Or did he have
Cowher?
Cowher
Bill
went.
Cowher.
Cowher went with O'Donnell, and they lost that one with O'Donnell?
They lost the one with O'Donnell, and then they won the one
with
against us.
Roethlisberger.
And did they win another one with Roethlisberger? Did Tomlin
that was Tomlin's first? That was
They
Tomlin's
have
first.
two with Big Ben. Yeah.
Tomlin. Cowher won one, lost
two with Big Ben, but one was with Cowher and one was with Tomlin.
Yes,
So
correct.
Brandon, who do you think has the stronger case? To me, it's easy, but I feel like you're kind of in Holmgren or Pete. Who has the stronger case?
Pete.
Well, Pete has the better resume potentially because he does also have the college championships. But I think Holmgren has the benefit of time that would get him in sooner.
Interesting.
I think they both eventually make it.
Yeah.
I think Holmgren's kind of the eventual, and I think Pete will be when he's available. Whatever that he is after 5 years. Yep. Okay, let's get him in.
We do not. It's the play that should not be named, especially fucking today, people. Good Lord.
That and yes, all of the stupid Super Bowl memories. Let's talk about the good ones, right?
Let's go around the
ones.
horn. Favorite Pete Carroll memory from his time in Seattle was, the part that if you didn't get a little bit teary listening to the press conference about his favorite moment being the moment standing on the podium in New York, holding up the Lombardi and finding his wife out in the crowd like that.
Glenda.
That moment's got to get you.
Yeah,
absolutely. That's amazing. And I actually we put that on Twitter, on the Seahawkers Pod Twitter, image of that, and on the Facebook, Seahawkers Podcast Network, an image of that kind of all artsy done up, and it's that exact moment. So it's man, Pete was he is special, and I know people got tired of the speech in the locker room, but what I didn't and never got tired of was the faces of the folks watching him in the locker room. Even if the speech was the same, and if it was similar 10 years on, the dudes were there. They were into it. And it wasn't just like, let's clap for the old man. They were into it. And that's something, right? So I will always, that's how I remember this dude, is like his players rallying around him. That's the image of Pete that will always stick with me.
I'm so fired up to talk about this, and there's some things that I think fit together in perfect fashion in this Super Bowl that we won. And I think the moment that's my favorite for Pete Carroll is the way that Cam Chancellor brought to life absolutely stealing Demaryius Thomas's soul early in that game, and what that meant for the franchise. And it just, you knew in that moment, you're like, oh, this is a mismatch, and they will be dominated. And it's that kind of fire and that kind of and the positivity from Pete, like all that stuff, man. I'm gonna miss all of that a ton, and I tried to put in as many Pete-isms in that as I could.
I heard a few of them, and I think a lot of those Pete-isms probably carry over to ours as well. So to our speech, I mean. And let's see, Phil, what do you got?
Oh, it's so hard. From the moment of SB48 when we got the safety, and I love how Pete said, hey, the 12 scored in the Super Bowl. So all those 12s that were there at that Super Bowl, he gave you credit for scoring in the Super Bowl. And from that moment, I just looked at my kids and said, we're getting this thing. In fact, I would put it this way. From the moment Sherman jumped up and tapped that ball away from Colin Kaepernick to Malcolm, I said, we're going to, I told my kid, we just jumped out of our seats, said, we're going to the Super Bowl and we're going to win. We're going to the Super Bowl and we're going to win. And from that, it was just enjoying it with Pete all through that Super Bowl, to the point where he has his arm around Russ and they're laughing about Malcolm getting the MVP, and they're laughing and going, he's a 7th round pick. They just knew it was a whole team thing. And whoever got the MVP, whatever, they were the best team in the world, and we got to enjoy it. And Pete's vibe with the whole thing it's tough to beat.
Yeah, and I sense some of us have particular moments. Some of us have just general Pete feelings, and I think mine, my lasting memory of Pete being a head coach on the Seahawks sidelines are any of those moments where a big play happens and Pete Carroll just like running down the sidelines with his arms up, like cheering as if he were a fan, but is a guy who gets to stand on the sideline and is watching it happen live, and just to be there and be one of those first guys to celebrate with the team when those big plays happen. And yeah, that's kind of how I remember Pete Carroll, as that sideline leader.
Yeah, love it, dude. And I want to bring this up on screen too. Another super chat by Amy. Thank you, Amy. $5 super chat. Pete throwing everything from his pockets until he finally found the challenge flag. Yeah, that's a great memory. It's like he had it in his sock at one point, right? It was like, where should I put the flag so I know how to get it? And then in some ways, I'd say sometimes we didn't want Pete to find that dang red flag, and we could kind of laugh about that now, right?
How about when he calmed Gino down with just a little hand over the belly?
Yeah.
Calm it down.
Yeah. That was a great, teacher, sensei type moment. Just no words, right? Just
what's Jeremy doing spilling the beans?
Yeah, Pete doesn't need to be an advisor to the team. He needs to be. See, this is an idea that I can definitely get behind. Bring on Pete as another podcast co-host. Jeremy Green coming in with the 199 super chat. Jeremy also the one that was tipping us off during 3 and 3 out about the Geno contract stuff. So big thanks to Jeremy.
And really, Jeremy's not saying which Pete. Right, this could be Pete Grimaldi from my third grade who farted when his ruler rolled off the table. It could be that guy. It could be Pete Grimaldi. I mean, we'll see what Jeremy means. It could be any Pete.
Guys, my very favorite thing about Pete has to be this. As I keep thinking, it's all the things he doesn't say. You think about all the different players and what they've done, and over and over and over, he just takes the high road. He always takes the high road. It comes back around. That's the life lesson that I get from Pete is, hey, you're out there in the public. People trash you. And what I do, people, they get frustrated. You cannot, in front of people, stand there and put people down, throw them under the bus. That will come back around. And what's come back around to Pete is he still loves life. He still loves whatever he gets to do. He finds joy in it. And I think a huge key is he does not denigrate people out in public. And that is incredible discipline, and it has blessed his life. And I think we should all learn a little bit from that. Super rare in his world.
That's why we need Pete Carroll on the show. So that way, when there's commenters, he can go after him too. I think he needs to, now that he's had that type of, he needs to find a way to vent everything that he's held back. And so, one of the squares on the podcast would be the way to do that.
That's a great point, Phil. It's really, really a nice point. And I think the juxtaposition we could all look at is like, people love Sean Payton as a coach. And then when stuff got a little wobbly in Denver, year one with him. I mean, he threw people, and in that case, Russ and others, directly under the bus. It's just
Both
something
axles.
that Pete. Yeah, boy, yeah, exactly. It might have been an 18-wheeler, in fact, Adam, right? It's just something that Pete would never have done. So that's a great point by you, dude.
Yeah, that's going to be one of the most difficult things, I think, in the transition to a new coach, is because those moments are going to be so obvious to us after watching Pete for 14 years and
Class.
It was part of the reason why it was so obvious too. Jim Mora coming in after Mike Holmgren, because that moment when he threw his field goal kicker under the bus, I felt like that was kind of the end of his time in Seattle too. We've got Nightbringer 2000 with a $9.99 super chat. John Ryan panic face on the fake field goal against the Packers. That was my face when I heard the news about Pete today. Pete is one of the Seahawks GOATs. I'm going to miss his enthusiasm and energy. Absolutely.
It's one of the things I will always take away from Pete. The time that he has been the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks happened to coincide with probably the roughest stretch of my life, and it's not even close. And I'll tell you what, there was some of the Pete speak that bled into my real life in terms of positivity and competing and trying to take the high road in certain situations, in just his style of leadership in the times that I have had the opportunity to lead other people that I took to heart. It actually had an impact on my life. Now, I'm not saying that like Pete Carroll changed my life and like anything like that, but like, and it's going to be a part of me forever. And that's part of the reason I'm going to miss him as much as I will. Help me get through that time in life that I didn't think I was going to get through.
Yeah.
Duhuman plays with the 4.99 super chat. Pete Carroll always taking ownership and humble. And those two things definitely character traits. Those, if I were to pick a couple traits, I mean, other than winning mentality and competition, I think these are two other traits that I'd want to make sure that we had in a head coach moving forward.
For sure.
Nice.
We'll have to see which one it is. And, the other thing that we're going to get out of this, depending on what happens this offseason, we're going to be able to see, was the trench thing a Pete thing or was the trench thing a John thing? Because, in this press conference, we got a little bit of him being like, I'm fired up for John to have this opportunity and all that, almost as if like this is kind of John's show now completely, almost whoever they bring in as a head coach. So, which kind of led me to believe, well, maybe most of it had been Pete's show. And that's kind of why they ended up, clashing heads, and Pete's the one who's gone and John isn't. I don't know. We'll find out.
Yeah.
Well, I really want to thank everybody for joining us today. Thanks to everybody who joined us in the chat and your comments, and a big thanks to everyone in the super chat as well.
Bloomy, you're just getting warmed up, buddy. You can't help but crush it, man. You can't help but crush it.
Oh, it's Bloomy. That's great.
Bloomy, your run's not over. You've still got plenty of years left. Just like we've still got years left with this show, gentlemen. We're gonna have, like we've talked about, this is just gonna add more and more items of for us to talk about in this off season. It's gonna be a busy one, and looking forward to doing it with you guys. Can't wait.
Yeah, this off season just got spicy, right? It's immediately spicy. So bring it on. It's gonna be fun.
And I think with that,
there's only one thing left to say.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Go
Go
Hawks.
Hawks.